Welcome to CMMSradio, a podcast, blog site, and general resource for all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey. We'll bring in experts along the way to help us learn more about CMMS, facilities operations, and much more. If you need help with the CMMS project, send a message at CMMSradio.com using the What's on Your Mind link. Suggest a topic, share your CMMS story, or ask questions. So thanks for tuning in. Today we are joined by Griffin Hamilton. He is the host of the Modern Facilities Management Podcast, and he is co-founder and CRO, Chief Revenue Officer of FlowPath, which is a facilities management platform that's making a lot of waves out there. And he also is a great steward of the future of facilities maintenance and management, in that he's got a mindful eye towards what's going to happen as we get this gap with people in maintenance and facilities. So, Griffin, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That's quite the intro. And it's odd being on the other side of this. I know you mentioned the podcast that I host, and I mean, I've been doing that for 2 years, and it's when people come on, they get nervous before I hit the record button. I'm like, well, it's just a conversation. And I'm just accustomed to the one asking questions, not answering the questions. And so now we're hitting record. And I'm like, oh, I'm kind of nervous now. I did a podcast on my own 2 hours ago and it was nothing. And now, I got the butterflies going, but I guess here we are. And again, appreciate the invite. This is awesome. I know we've had a lot of conversations and excited to actually hit record on some topics we've talked about, just you and I.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of fun being on the other side, because I know we did one a couple months back and I felt the exact same way. And what's really beneficial about this is we get that kind of curiosity and a little bit of anxiety behind it, because, you want to do well, but everything's going to be fine. So I kind of had a list of things that we're going to talk about. I don't know if we'll go in order or not, but the first thing I really want to talk about, I love journey stories. I love origin stories. And I do have an understanding of the background and how FlowPath came to be and all that, but I think it would be really nice if people could hear from you what your background was from a maintenance perspective prior to FlowPath, because I do believe that was the impetus to how FlowPath came into existence. So if you could give us a little taste on what you were doing before FlowPath, and then how you went into this venture and kind of the problem or the gap that you saw that you were trying to solve. So if you could talk about that. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So prior to starting FlowPath, I started a company where I was servicing restaurants throughout the greater Atlanta area. Found a huge issue with managing my clients, making sure that they knew I was coming out on time, and it was frankly difficult to get them to commit to any sort of time. And each time I went out and serviced them, I realized that it was just very difficult for them to understand what exactly I did. Understand the history of the work that I was doing. And they kept asking me all these questions for all this information. And I even got to the point where they had no idea how much they paid me. And for the restaurants, they're making pennies on the dollar, and they are very detail oriented when it comes to cost. But that seemed to be such a big cost that they just kind of threw out there of it not being monitored, which was kind of mind blowing to me. And I found that the more locations that someone was managing, the more complexities there were, and there was just a lot of gaps in their operations. And so that bothered me over and over again. And I found, 6 months after first thinking of, there's got to be a better way, I had a conversation with a client where they had a stack of business cards, and they mentioned that if they lost that, it was their entire vendor network and their whole operations would not go under, but it would be a very difficult couple of months to make sure that they were doing everything they should. So called a longtime friend of mine, Brandon Cummings, who's the CTO of FlowPath. He's a developer, has been for over a decade now. And I've known him since kindergarten, and said, I found a problem. I think we could solve it. And unbeknownst to me, his older brother, Alex Cummings, was running operations for a few startups. He had a background in the military, doing a lot of PM and maintenance work on amphibious assault vehicles, and found the issues on that side of the maintenance world, and was also using what are now some of our competitors. And so it was just a very odd stars aligning, where Brandon could create just about anything from a technology standpoint. Alex had the experience working with technology that was antiquated, not user friendly, and I was had the experience as a vendor and saw that relationship and the gaps in the relationship. And so, in 3 years ago, late 2019, early 2020, we went all in, and I sold my previous business. They quit their jobs, and we began the journey of FlowPath.
I love it. I love it. And here's why. So I have a background in CMMS and there's some similarities, but what's great about your story is the three of you bringing those extremely unique yet highly relevant perspectives to how you're going to solve these problems. You've got the real-time experience, and then at the same time, you can align and develop that vision of what you're really going to do, how you're going to solve that gap properly. Not to suggest that the other systems aren't good for whatever they do for whoever they do it for, but that's that unique kind of what starts out as a niche play.
Mm-hmm.
And then you come to find the commonality of those problems are really everywhere in myriad industries. And I think that's one thing I wanted to mention is that with FlowPath, and my understanding being kind of exposed to FlowPath over the last year, give or take a month, where you have this really good fit for certain types of industries that have the right moving parts and the right gaps. And I like how easy it is to use, but you really did solve that problem. And I think with both Alex and Brandon, I mean, you're bringing a lot of horsepower to a startup when you've got somebody that can develop and code. I mean, I wish I would have had that back when we were doing it, because it took us like 3 times as long to get to, for example, where you guys are at, because we're outsourcing and we're trying to
Mm-hmm.
manage that and learn along the way. So man, that's a really great story. So what I wanted to talk about next, when it comes to not just FlowPath, but the podcast, the Modern Facilities Management Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Now, was that something that you started doing after the launch, the initial launch of FlowPath, or was that a precursor to FlowPath?
It's a good question. I launched it afterwards. This must have been 2 years ago that had the idea, and it came to me. Just I'm always trying to learn, and as we went from a more vendor centric platform and into the more broad area of facilities management and maintenance management, I realized that I needed to learn everything I could about facilities management and maintenance management. And I'm a big consumer of podcasts and couldn't really find any out there that were consistently producing content. And unfortunately, in facilities management, there's not too many books out there, and it's not the sexy industry that has a new thought leader coming out every other week. That's launching a new novel, releasing a new novel there. And so beyond textbooks, I had really nothing other than just Googling things. And I was like, you know what? There's no podcasts out there, and I know I could buy a mic. I'm sure I could find a platform, and I'm pretty good at asking questions because I'm generally curious about the industry, and why not? And took the leap. First couple of folks I reached out to, they're like, well, who have you interviewed before? And I was like, nobody. And that was a little difficult, but after the first 10, 15 interviews, people started reaching out, which is really fascinating and pretty humbling, going to these different conferences. And I'm just talking to people. Hey, I know who you are. And it's like, this is just beyond weird for me, because I'm just asking questions. I'm not the expert here. I'm not trying to advertise that, hey, I know everything about facilities. Quite the opposite. I want to make sure it's like, hey, I have really smart people coming on the show to talk about what they're great at. And it's just been a wild ride, but yeah, it's just started with me being curious and trying to learn more.
Well, what I like about it the most is that, so you're really close to 70 episodes, and
Just hit 70.
okay, because I think the last I saw you were at 68, and I know you try to do them every week, and I know
Mm-hmm.
some weeks if you push, you try to double book that week and see if you can keep up on that. But you bring in lots of different experts and different perspectives so that you can get that real time story to how they're solving problems, where they got their experience, which is really what a lot of us, when we consume podcasts and want to be curious about things and just improve our knowledge or get exposed to something new, by doing that. And that kind of inspired me a little bit, because I started watching your podcast, I think it was last year.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember exactly what month it was. And I think that's the right way to do it. You don't have to be the expert, because if you know how to bring in an expert, you're going to get the same impact, and it might even be a little bit better,
Right.
because it'll resonate with more people. Because I know you've had just so many different kind of industries and perspectives. So I think that's great. And I like the way you guys do the trade shows. And I think if you're seeing that recognition when somebody comes to a trade show and they're like, oh, I know you, or maybe they recognize FlowPath, or they recognize the podcast, they recognize your face. I mean, that's definitely humbling, but it's
It is.
super
It's
fun, right?
weird. I mean, it is really, it is fun, and it really shows how small of a community facilities management is. I mean, every facility needs a manager, right? So it is a huge industry, but at the same time, it is a tight knit community, and that was something else that's been it's been just cool to be a part of, where people just expand their network, and just people are so willing to help one another if you just ask. And having people reach out to others that's like, hey, I listened to this episode about this topic, and I'd love to talk to you more about this. It's like, that is what is really fascinating to me, is those connections that I'm just a platform, right? I'm by no means not trying to change the world. There's a lot of recognition that needs to be had in the industry, but at least having a platform to do just that and provide people with the avenue to expand their network. And that is one of the themes of just reaching out to people and asking for help, and realizing that we're all learning. And you mentioned the expert word. I kind of hate that. I'm skeptical of anyone that says they're an expert, but there are people that have been in the industry for decades that literally wrote the book that I've talked to, that you'd be surprised on how much they're still learning, and how much they are still wanting to stay up to date with the new technologies, the new trends. And so that has been what's pretty cool about the last 2 years of the podcast.
Yeah, and I think, anybody that does hear this episode, I think they really should tune into it, and try to, if you can, watch all the episodes and keep up with it. Because for me, I've always been able to learn something, and that's kind of what matters. That's why people are consuming these, not just for entertainment, but to gain insights. So I think it's really great, and I'm glad that you do it.
Yeah.
So my next question, we're going to focus from here down to your shirt.
Do I need to sit up a little bit more?
No. You're good. I think I know a little bit about the history of the Puffin when it comes to your story and the FlowPath story, but I would rather have you tell the story about the Puffin, because it seems to resonate with people in a unique way, because either they don't know what it is and they're like, what is that? I'm curious. Or they know what it is and they're like, oh, I love the Puffin. So tell me a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
I appreciate that. And it is something that has also taken LinkedIn by storm. Puffin Mania has been trending a few times, and that's been quite the surprise. But as we started out, we had not the slightest idea from what to name the company. We knew the direction we were going. We knew what we were building, but the name, that's always difficult, right? And we were throwing out all these different ideas, and I can't tell you how it happened, but Brandon and I both fell in love with the idea of our company being called Puffin, CMMS, or something along those lines with a Puffin. And I wish there was more context to the meaning behind it, other than we just kind of liked it. But from there, we have paid tribute to those beginning early conversations about the name of the company. And if you run a report where you don't have the right data or filters in there, there's an error in there, we'll have little Easter eggs with a Puffin. And have then, over the last couple of months, we've since released these shirts to various customers with the Puffin logo, and people just seem to go crazy about it. And I'd love to, I've got a list of different Puffin facts that I could somehow bridge the gap between what it is and how it's meaningful to us. But unfortunately, it was one of those things where we're just throwing around ideas and it just stuck.
I think it's great. And it's highly unique. I mean, it
Hmm.
really is. And that kind of speaks to, anybody that's out there doing something. Yeah, if you're going to be true to yourself, that is going to serve you. Might take a little while, right? Like you're saying now,
Hmm.
it's starting to pick up some steam and trend. And I see the posts and the different people that they just love their Puffin. They love their Puffin shirt, and
Hmm.
I still got to get one for myself. But I just wanted to talk about that a little bit so people could understand it. So go check out FlowPath, see if you can find some stuff on the Puffin. Go out there and read about the Puffin. But it's a unique part of your history and your story, and I'm glad that you're staying true to it, keeping those kind of Easter eggs within the platform for people to find and discover. Because again, that goes back to your origin, a little bit of it's a part of your DNA, and
Hmm.
it's a fun thing. So
Yeah, I think I might start altering this story down the line where I'll throw out random fact that a puffin is one of the few birds that could fit multiple fish in its bill. It doesn't digest it or ingest it and then regurgitate it to feed its young. It actually, has up to 10 or 12 fish in its bill. And that's something where, just like a facilities manager, you're juggling 10 to 12 things at a time. And you don't want to throw up on yourself, I guess, if you want to keep the analogy going. But
it's
how's
true.
that?
Excellent. That's perfect. That's perfect. It's gold. So now I want to switch into something else, and this is there's two things in recent news, right?
Hmm.
So number one, FlowPath came with a big announcement, and I believe this was yesterday, in reference to an integration with Service Titan,
Correct.
which is really important because it starts to really round out that comprehensive solution, because now you not only have a solution that really keeps you moving in facilities management and maintenance, but now you have additional resources and connectability to these various vendors and service providers.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I think that is going back into my background as a vendor and seeing that relationship. I know that intimately well and what it takes to be a vendor and to maintain that relationship with each one of your clients. And it can be difficult. And that's why Service Titan is a great platform for vendors. Um, what we also recognize at FlowPath is that there is no single, no platform is going to be the single tech tool that you use. You need to, and it's pretty cool to see this evolve as an industry, but have a complete tech stack in facilities management. So whether it's building automation, your CMMS, if you're using vendors, having a vendor integration there, IoT sensors. I mean, there's a lot of technology that's coming out, and we recognize that integrating with those different technologies that are available to, for our circumstances, be that source of action from the data being collected. That's really the direction we're going. But with regards to Service Titan and that integration, we recognize that the industry is going towards and leaning into this trend of outsourcing and really relying heavily on different vendors. And so having and leaning into that relationship between your portfolio and your vendors is crucial. And as we all know, finding talent is never easy and it's only getting harder. And that is something where you're going to continuously rely more heavily on those partners that you have. And so having that as a seamless communication means the communication from your centralized CMMS and FlowPath with your vendors and your partner systems, that just made all the sense in the world.
I agree. I definitely agree. Having, long time ago been a vendor myself in the maintenance and facilities management industry, having those connections really benefits the client, especially if they have a single platform that allows that access because of the integration. And that leads me to the next part of what I was talking about. You also changed your logo.
We
And I
did.
read a little bit about it, but instead of me explaining it, I just wanted to first say it looks great. It's innovative. It's very, very modernized, especially compared to the one that you had. Although I didn't have any problems with that, but then when I read about it, you in the write up, there were some explanations as to why the change took place. So maybe you could give just a really brief synopsis on that.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to our team internally that we did not outsource that by any means. That was all Ben in particular, who's
Mm.
our director of engineering, and he spent a lot of long nights into thinking of what FlowPath is as a brand and making sure that what we're putting out there aligns with that brand, and being that modern, sleek, user-friendly technology platform. We wanted it to have that same feel for the logo that we have out there, and so he did an incredible job with that. And that is something where I just keep refreshing my phone and opening it up with the screensaver as the new logo. And it's just one of those things that it's another step of just being. It's hard to explain how proud you are of the people you've surrounded yourself with, but just like that's one more reminder every day that we've got an excellent team. And not to make this sound like commercials, just I get pretty passionate about what we're building, but yeah, I think that's just a great image of what we are as a brand, and what we represent in the space.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people would somehow relate to that, especially when you look at the way the logo changed and what went into it, how you actually have the way it's integrated with the F and the P,
Mm-hmm.
and the way it's shaped. I saw the information on all the different renderings, and then all that, and what it takes is that dedication, that passion. And when you talk about the team thing, and this is not to sell anything to anybody out there, this is just for people to understand and recognize. And this is important for CMMS Radio, because what's important to me is that people that are availing solutions out there to solve their real-time problems day to day, I want them to be with companies that are passionate, that do have that kind of willingness to care for, or even caress, really nurture their clients. And to communicate that through your brand, and the right kind of logo is a part of that. So it's part of your evolution. And the timing's incredible, because you got the new logo, then you've got the integration.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of the questions I was going to ask you today is, well, what's next for FlowPath? And I think, well, we kind of see that right now, but when it comes to kind of trends, or what you see coming up in the next 1 or 2 years, is there anything on the horizon that you could share that you're going to be doing, or things that you're seeing in the way of trends that you need to adapt to?
Yeah, I think that where we're going aligns with the trends of the industry, and I've alluded to it, but the reliance on outsourcing, reliance on your vendors and outsourcing a lot of tasks, whether they're emergencies or preventative maintenance plans. So we've already, with this announcement of the integration with Service Titan, leaning into that partnership and leaning into that direction. I mentioned earlier, as far as the evolving tech stack and facilities, and that being something that uh, again, us wanting to, as a company, be that source of action where we are collecting data across your entire tech stack, and being that source of action to then go repair something proactively, to have a solid data backed preventative maintenance strategy. So you have all this different data across your tech stack, wanting to have a centralized location to actually digest it and make the most out of it.
So got two more actually, it might be three, but two more questions.
Make it four.
All right, fair enough. So in your opinion, when somebody's going to deploy a system like FlowPath or otherwise, is it better for them to go into that with the idea that they have to do this comprehensive deployment, rollout, configuration, all these things before they start benefiting? Or is it more along the lines of, you could start now and lean in on what you can get going on right now?
That's a great question. And there is, first off, there is no system that's going to be the right system for everybody. And I'd be the first one to tell you that. And we've turned down customers before just because it's not the right partnership. And I'll point in the right direction. But every situation is going to be different. At the end of the day, it goes back to, what are you looking to accomplish, and where are you right now? And so it's difficult to say what each story looks like, going from that decision, or even the decision making process, to the implementation. Um, if you are looking to go from 0 to 1 and you just want to digitize these processes, then that's a 30-minute lift where, all right, let's just get a work order system up and running. And now you're collecting data on what issues you're resolving. If you're looking to get more in the weeds with a mature inventory management, or preventive maintenance or project management strategy there, that it takes time, certainly. If you've got thousands or hundreds of thousands of assets or inventory items, sure, I'm not going to tell you it's going to be an overnight item to to deploy that, but that is one of the things that I think where I preach is having that right partner that will help guide you through that entire process. And one of the lines I use, it's the maturation of a facilities management organization, which is a tongue twister, but that is something where I see this time and time again where people are just reactive, and you have start with the end in mind, right? So you have this end goal of having a preventive maintenance strategy, having the data behind how much you're spending on your inventory, on your labor, but you can't get there overnight. And you want to make sure you have a partner that is with you to help deploy these strategies, and hopefully their tool being the right tool to deploy those strategies. But it all goes back to that partnership and making sure that you have a mutual understanding of where you're at right now, immediate objective, and then long-term goal, and making sure that they're there along the ride.
That sounds like not only a good plan, but it's well founded. It makes sense. Uh, I've seen it in my own experience. I've heard about it from other people, and I've gotten feedback from people that actually utilize your platform on how that actually goes. Some of them go to here and then they're good to go for a little while, and then they might start pushing a little bit further. Others go a little bit further because they might have already had a system. They know they've got to put these three things in place for them to be effective, but they've got data and you guys can lean in and help them get that in there. So I know a lot about that. Again, it's not meant to be, super salesy or anything like that, but I just love the idea of people getting a system with somebody that's going to back them up, somebody that's going to be a resource for them so that they can thrive and benefit within their maintenance and facilities management operations. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what I want for everybody, because I know what it's like to go from nothing to something and then improve and achieve constant improvement.
Yeah, and there's never a finish line.
No.
There's not a finish line there. No matter
Never.
what you deploy and how mature of an organization you have, you're always going to have direction from top down of we need to save money and we need to be more efficient. That's never going to stop. And you're uh, no matter how successful you are, there's going to be a little bit of room for improvement. And as you scale up, 1% makes a big difference, right? And so that is one of those things where just keep tweaking, keep evolving. And that's where having that partner comes into play. And so that's what I really preach, is just making sure you have that right partner. And again, there's a lot, I'm very familiar with the space, and there's a lot of really great companies out there that have tools that help people do just that. And you just got to make sure that you're during the evaluation process, that it's a well thought out process, and you are getting what you eventually are going to be needing there.
Right. I always tell people, if I'm consulting or some of my monologues that I do on CMMS radio, ask the hard questions, because the vendor that you want to connect with is going to take that. They're going to take that and work with it, and they're going to give you what you need to know so that you have that confidence to move forward. And it's not bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
If they start bullshitting you, it's probably not the right vendor. And I'm not throwing mud at anybody out there. Everybody's trying to do a good job. So 2 more questions. Number 1, where do you think the most ROI comes from if you could pick? I know this is really hard. If you could pick one thing within facilities operations, and I'll just give you a couple examples so you don't have to go through the litany of what you know and what you've seen. So is it in work order management? Is it in vendor or service vendor management? Is it in inventory, or is it in assets and equipment PMs?
God, having a blanket statement is so difficult. Because you could be talking to someone who their assets are maybe $500,000 here or there, or you have a piece of machinery that's in the 7 figures, and clearly you want to have a PM program that an extra 3 years on that asset is going to be much more of a larger ROI than any sort of inventory management program there. So again, a little bit of a cop out here, but it really depends. I would say just from the get-go, having a foundation of work order management, of knowing where you're spending your time and your money, that alone on the work order side, I think is the most valuable from the start, because you can't be more efficient if you don't know where you're spending your time. You can't just pull it out of thin air saying, I'm going to spend less time doing, not important task here. And you can't save money unless you know where it's going. And
Right.
so you can take that from a business perspective, or even your own personal lives, where it's, I'm going to save $1,000 this month. It's like, well, how? I don't know. I don't know where I'm spending my money. So I don't know where to pull that $1,000 from. Same concept here. It's like, if you don't understand where you're spending your time or your money, you're not going to be able to be more efficient and save money. So at least starting out with that work order process where you're capturing that data, I mean, that just sets the foundation for everything else.
I love that. And that's not a cop out by any means. That's actually what people need to hear and understand, that there's not always a right way, but you're going to have to start at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that will lead you to the next step, because you were specifically talking about, and I've heard this from you before, with regards to the maturity that an operation can achieve over time, and they're going to have to start there. So last question, this is a simple one. It's really common. And that is, what is the best way for people to get in touch, reach out, and connect if they wanted to?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm sure you'll post a link to my LinkedIn profile. My email address, griffin@getflowpath.com. You can find me on the website as well, getflowpath.com. I'm kind of all over the internet. If you want to check out the podcast, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, I believe it's all over as well. So that's the Modern Facilities Management Podcast. So I'm sure if you just Google me real quick, a few different items are going to pop up. Hopefully, all good. But yeah, I'm certainly open to connecting with anyone here on LinkedIn. So that's probably the best way to reach out.
Excellent. And I wanted that so that people can take that time, make that effort to reach out if they need help, they need guidance. And there's a lot of other things we're maybe going to get into on another episode later, when it comes to some of the outreach that you do, some of the things you do to really help the industry with the up and comers. And we'll do that on another one, maybe in 2023. I want to thank you for being on the show. I want to thank you for sharing all this information and being such a gracious guest. And I want to wish you and everyone at FlowPath a happy holiday season and a phenomenal start to the new year.
Well, you as well. It's been a pleasure as always. Thank you so much for having me. And we'll be talking here soon.
All right. Thank you very much, Griffin. I really appreciate you.
All right. Be good.
Thanks. Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question, and follow us on your favorite podcasting platform. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project, and keep listening to CMMS Radio. Do you have a CMMS story? We'd love to hear it. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.